What you're going to need today is your workbook, and I have a pencil. I also have my pens handy, but you don't have to have those. You can just use the pencil. If your box hasn't come and you don't have your workbook yet, just grab a piece of paper. You could use a lined notebook or just a plain piece of paper, and you can still do a lot of these exercises with us. So in the workbook, you'll see the first part of the workbook is all printed. And then the last part of the workbook are these blank papers. So this is called Canson marker paper, and we're going to be using this to do some tracing. So we'll get a sheet of that, and in our workbook it's printed front to back, so I like to create a little done pile. And we have all of our guides here and our strokes, and the tracing paper can go right over the top and you can see through it to be able to do your lettering. And so this is really great to be able to do tracing. If you have a hard time seeing through the tracing paper, you don't have to use it. If it makes it a little hard, you can definitely just go right into the workbook, and that will totally work as well. Today, I'm not going to use the tracing paper just so it's easier for you guys to see. I'm just going to be using the workbook. And the style that we're learning today, we're learning a bounce script. So I'm going to show you briefly what that is. So what I'm going to teach you first, get my pencil to work here, is a very traditional looking style of lettering like this. So we're going to learn all the basics and how to do it this way, and then I'm going to show you what you can do to change it to do something like this. This is really sloppy and fast, but just the idea of how to make it bounce and kind of change the proportions of the letters. So before we can get here, we have to learn these basics, and then we'll get to this. So the very first thing that I want to teach you today are called the basic strokes. So they look like kind of random, funny little shapes, but they all combine to make almost all of the lowercase letters. So we're going to go through each of these today, and I'll show you how to do them. So what we'll do here is I'm going to tell you what the names of the guides are. So first we have this guideline, and that is called the baseline. That's where the base of all of the lowercase letters sit. We have this, which is the waistline. That's where most of the lowercase letters come up to that point. This is the ascender line. So any letter that has a portion of it that ascends above the baseline is going to ascend up to that point. And then we have here the descender line. So any letter that has a portion of it that descends below the baseline would come down to that line. And then this last one is called an angle line. And so that's just the traditional angle with calligraphy. So I'm going to be referring to the guidelines as that, and I'll also be referring to the basic strokes by their names. So they're all labeled, and there's also this little arrow direction to show you which direction you need to draw the stroke in, because that is very important. So this first one is called an upstroke. So this one, you can put your tracing paper over and trace one, but you're just going to start at the baseline and you do a slight curve up to the waistline. And I'm going to see if I can get this to focus on where I'm writing versus my hand. So baseline, slight curve up to waistline. And it doesn't have to be exact, and it's okay if it's a little shaky, but that's just the general idea. The next one is called a downstroke. So this one, we're starting at the waistline, we're coming down to the baseline, and we're going to do it right at the same angle as those angle lines. So this is the downstroke, waistline, down to baseline. Next is called an overturn. This one starts at the baseline, and you're going to do a slight curve up to the waistline and come back down. So trace the first one, get a feel for it, and then draw a few on your own. It's basically an upside down U shape. Next is the underturn. This one is like a U shape. You're going to start at the baseline, curve down to the, waistline, down to the baseline, and back up to the waistline again. So it's just like this U shape, waistline, come down to baseline, curve back up. Next is called a commandant. This one starts at the waistline and you're going to come about halfway down between these two and then come back up again. So waistline, halfway down and back up. This is just a connector stroke. It's very small and it's a little miniature underturn. From here we can turn our paper over to the back, and now we can do it on this side as well. And I'm going to put just a sheet of tracing paper under here so I have some cushion. So this next one here is called a compound curve. So this one starts at the baseline, curves up to the waistline, curves back down and back up again. So waistline, baseline to waistline to back up. I'm trying to get it to focus on my writing. So it's kind of just this little squiggle shape. And we want to have equal amounts of negative space here and here. We don't want something like this. We want it to be equal on both sides. Next is the O form. This one we're going to start drawing at this 2 o'clock position. So I'm going to actually start drawing it over here so that it won't focus on my hand and will focus on the letters. But you start at 2 o'clock, move up to the waistline, come back down and back up again. So it connects here. So there's our O form. If you're having trouble connecting the ends, if you're getting something like this, as you're drawing, once you get down to this bottom portion, keep your eye on the ending, and that makes it a little easier to connect. We've got 2 more of these basic strokes. This one is called the ascending loop. So this one starts at the waistline and you're going to do a loop up to the ascender line and come back down. And you want the portion moving down to be straight and in line with the angle line. So I like to draw them right on top of the angle, if that helps. So that's the ascending loop. And the last one is the descending loop. This one starts at the waistline, you're going to curve down to the descender line and curve back up to the waistline again. So it's kind of reminiscent of a J or a G. It's a direct reflection of the ascending loop. So those are all the basic strokes. So they start to combine to make all of the lowercase letters. So if we look at this example, we have an O form and an underturn. If we just squish those together, that's going to give us the letter A. If we go on to this one, we have an O form, a descending loop, and an upstroke. We squish all those together, that's going to give us the letter G.